Today is July 13th, 2023. Welcome back to the Chapter 49 podcast. My name is Larry Lannan. I'm a volunteer and I'm a retiree as well and do some volunteer work with Chapter 49 in the area of communications. We're happy that you chose to join us today, and we're back after just a week off for the July 4th holiday to give Duncan Giles a chance to have some time off. Duncan, welcome back.
Thank you, Larry. Good to be here as always.
Good to have you here as well. And we're very honored to have once again Tony Reardon, the national president of NTEU. Tony, you were early on one of our first guests we had on when we started this podcast about 3 years ago. And sadly, this is our last chance to talk to you, but it's good news for you because you are set to retire.
Yes, sir, I am. And let me first say to both you, Duncan and Larry, thank you very, very much for having me on today. I think I've told you this in the past, and so for all the listeners out there, this is something that every single week, at least all the weeks that you all produce one of your broadcasts, I am a listener oftentimes, but sometimes watch the video feed. And you both do an outstanding job, and I thank you both for the service that you provide, not only to Chapter 49 members, which I know is sort of your core audience, but you also go out across the country, and I think even beyond at times. So the service that you provide is outstanding, and I'm one of your loyal listeners or viewers. So,
well, will you continue to be that once you retire?
The answer to that question is yes.
Okay,
100% yes. I will tell you that oftentimes what I will do is I'll go out for I try to go out for some long walks, and so I'll oftentimes listen, and I'll do that while I'm walking. So I'm going to absolutely continue to do that as long as Duncan doesn't cut me off of being able to be one of your loyal listeners.
Well, we'll try to make sure Duncan doesn't mess up the works on that one. So, well, yeah, and Tony, you've been very. I mean, in all seriousness, you've been very, very generous with your time to talk to us. And I want to say that when I thought about this podcast being our last together, I go back to, I think it was 1997. I could be off by a few years. First time you and I ever had a discussion. Chapter 49 had not sent anyone to national training for many years, and I finally was able to talk to chapter president at the time to sending me. And you and I had a really good conversation, kind of away from the actual room where everything was going on. At that time, that was in the late 90s. We were still trying to figure out technology. Not that we have it all figured out now, but you and I know I ended up calling you, sending you messages, talking to you at the convention, mostly about technology issues. And you were an invaluable source for us at that time.
That was, Larry, I actually recall this. And that was at a time when I knew a lot about the, then present day technologies. I have, since becoming national president, I've kind of lost a lot of that knowledge. I'm not quite up to date the way I once was.
Well, you have a good staff to take care of you, and that's good.
Absolutely true.
Okay, I'm going to let Duncan Giles ask the first question from here.
Yeah, Tony. First question is, for me, is what do you see as the future of the IRS and your thoughts on Commissioner Werfel?
Duncan, those are really, really excellent questions. And so here's what I'd say. I think as I project forward, excuse me, I think the future of the IRS looks pretty good. We've had the infusion of the 80 billion, now unfortunately down to 60 billion of the IRA money. And we all know, right, that it was desperately needed. And we also, I think, all know, or at least certainly most of us know, that that money is already starting to pay dividends. The IRS has really had I would say, a long road, that it has had to try to travel to start to rebuild its personnel and to also modernize its systems. I sort of jokingly say to people all the time, the IRS is using equipment that and software applications that are older than me, and look at all my gray hair. But in all seriousness, I mean, it's true. And so, this $60 billion is, I think, going to really help the IRS in terms of its rebuilding and also building up its staffing. But I will tell you this. I think I think it's important that the GOP attacks on the IRS stop. Here's the case. You mentioned, Larry, I think that I've been around for 30 years, and it's actually now, I think, 33 and a half years. And, I remember a time when the GOP would really fully support a tax agency that ensured that people paid what they owed. And so now we have a tax gap in the hundreds of billions of dollars. We've got a GOP that for whatever reason seems okay with that. And I will point out, it is the IRS that collects 95% of the money that funds our government by enforcing the tax laws that Congress wrote. So, I sort of, you probably kind of hear or see maybe a little bit of passion in me on this, because I candidly take offense when lawmakers claim that the IRS is unleashing an army of 87,000 armed agents, to go after the American people. It simply is false. And they know it's a lie. It's political posturing. And they say it over and over and over. And unfortunately, it starts to kind of seep into, or maybe more than seep, into the psyche, into the consciousness of the American people. And it makes it, I think, hard and even dangerous for IRS employees to do the jobs that they were hired to do. And again, that, they're simply enforcing the tax laws that Congress wrote. Duncan, you also mentioned my thoughts on Commissioner Werfel. Here's what I will tell you. So I think it was within about 2 hours of President Biden nominating Danny Werfel to be the next commissioner, I got a phone call on my cell phone from Danny Werfel. And I was very appreciative to get the call. And I think it showed that he understands the importance of frontline employees and of NTEU. So he called me, and right out of the box, he said to me, "So Tony, what is it that your members are looking for in a commissioner?" And I will tell you, I really appreciated that question and where it came from. And so what I told him at the time was, I said, look, the IRS employees, NTEU's members, are looking for a commissioner that is a leader, that will make certain that employees have the tools and the resources that they need to effectively do their jobs. They're looking for somebody that has political courage. And what I meant by that, and he and I talked a little bit about that, what I meant by that was they're looking for somebody who is going to stand up for IRS employees, no matter how much pressure is coming at him, in this case, to make sure that he's protecting and getting the stories out about the good work that the IRS does, and not simply buckle underneath the pressure of people who are trying to really go after the Internal Revenue Service. I also said to him, I said a whole lot to him, but trying to sort of break this down a little bit. I also said to him, that there are two other things that I would strongly urge you to do. Number one, when you travel around the country to different IRS offices, number one, make certain that you meet in a meaningful way with IRS chapter presidents, with our chapter presidents. That will send a powerful message, I said to him, to the employees, to NTEU, that you value frontline employees, that you value NTEU. And it will also provide you the opportunity to make certain that you are hearing the unvarnished truth of what is going on in the IRS. He said, Tony, excellent point, I'll do it. I said, the second thing, I would urge you as soon as possible to convene the IRS employees, or the IRS chapter presidents, NTEU's chapter presidents, in Washington, D.C., in a 1 or 2 day meeting where you can actually hear from them as a collective about what's going on, and where the challenges are, what the problems are, what the good things are that are going on in the IRS for frontline employees, in the relationship with NTEU, so on and so forth. He said, Tony, done. I will tell you that Doreen Greenwald, NTEU's National Executive Vice President, and I had some conversations about that immediately following that call. And we both wondered, will he really be able to pull this off and have this meeting? Will he really ultimately be willing to do it? Here's where it went from there. We had several conversations with him. That one in-person meeting turned into 4 virtual meetings where we broke down the group of IRS chapter presidents into 4 different groups. And, in those 1 hour sessions, each of those sessions were 1 hour. In each of those, we talked, and Duncan, you were a part of that. We talked about the challenges, the issues, the problems, the concerns, all that stuff. And then that really gave us the foundation for what we needed to discuss when the commissioner brought all of NTEU's national leadership and also our chapter leadership into Kansas City. It wasn't in Washington, D.C., it was in Kansas City. And we had a 1 day meeting. So that brings us, Duncan, to my impressions of Commissioner. I think he understands how to lead a large organization. I think he values frontline employees. I think he is willing to listen. I think he's demonstrated that. But as I said to him, and as I said in front of our chapter presidents when we were assembled in that meeting, our members, our chapter leadership, we've all been listening to Happy Talk for years. People know the right things to say. The key, of course, is what is the action and what accountability is built into the process for that action, so things actually get done where frontline employees feel the benefits and actually experience the benefits. So sorry for that long answer.
Well, let me follow up with a question that really is more looking back, because as the national president, obviously for many years, you fight for things. One thing I learned is when I was a chapter official years ago, is that you have to have certain principles and you fight for them, and eventually it's done. It may take years, decades in some cases. But for example, you have some student loan relief as the law allows. You have some child care subsidies. You worked years to get that into the contract. I'd like you to do, first of all, with IRS, what you feel you've accomplished during your time as president, and maybe go a little further, some of the other agencies that NTEU represents. Talk about your biggest wins, what you've accomplished during your tenure as national president.
Well, Larry, thank you for that question. I think it's a great and timely question, candidly. I think I will just sort of piggyback on what I just said. I mean, one of the, I think, wins, certainly as it relates to the IRS, is exactly the sort of changing relationship between NTEU and IRS. And what I mean specifically by that is, for the first time in my memory anyway, you had the commissioner of the IRS bring all of the IRS chapter presidents in for this meeting that I just mentioned. I think, that speaks really highly for NTEU and certainly for the commissioner and the IRS, and the relationship, what I've always described as a very mature relationship between NTEU and IRS. we both parties have fought for years and years and years over a lot of things, and that those challenges have created a relationship that I think has put us now where, as I said, the commissioner did what he did by bringing everybody together. I think that is a major win for NTEU and for the IRS, and ultimately for the taxpayer. I think the funding that I mentioned before, now $60 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act, I think is huge. Look, I can recall a time when I was first at NTEU where the IRS was relatively well-funded and relatively well-staffed. And then we, of course, saw in about 2010 or so where things went. I mean, the funding went down. This agency was decimated, really, both in terms of funding and staffing. Lost, on the order of 20,000 employees net over that period of time, and created all the problems that we've seen, and really resulted in many ways what I think has been sort of a broken system. So I think the funding is, something certainly that NTE was fought for over a decade, and so I think it is huge for frontline employees, for the agency, and for taxpayers that this funding has come through. True enough, it dropped because of the fight that recently occurred and the deal that came about. So the $80 billion is now only $60 billion, but it's still $60 billion, and I think that's going to be really huge. We've had the child care subsidy program. I think that is a real masterpiece on the part of our leaders in bargaining and the things that we were able to get accomplished there. I think the expansion of telework to customer service representatives is a big deal. I think the work that was done between the IRS and NTEU through the pandemic, I'm not sure, a lot of people may not know that even before the pandemic was widely understood to be a pandemic, fortunately, I've said this about NTEU leadership, and I think it's been the history of NTEU leadership. Clearly, even before I became national president, NTEU has a way of seeing around corners, what's coming, and not only seeing around the corner, but then preparing. And I think this is an example. You had the pandemic, and so right away I contacted at that time Commissioner Reardon, and I said, look, we need to get our teams together and start to figure out how we're going to deal with this, because I believe this is going to be a huge issue. We started meeting, our teams started meeting every day for several months. I tell you that because I think that was important through that process to deal with a lot of the issues that were coming up, but it also, for me, created a model and sort of advanced that maturing of the relationship I talked about. It created a model where now we still meet with the IRS leadership on a regular basis about things far beyond the pandemic. So I think that is a win from my perspective. I think the fact that in 2022, IRS employees received, as I recall it, more than $90 million in awards, which is the highest amount ever delivered. So I think those are some of the things, kind of off the top of my head here, that were big wins for NTEU but obviously ultimately for employees. Now, in terms of sort of broadening that and looking at NTEU as a whole, I think most people on this that are listening or watching know that NTEU represents, obviously, IRS is the largest agency where we represent employees, but we represent employees in 33 other agencies. And so some of the wins over the period of time that I've been national president that I think point to is probably the first one I would mention is paid parental leave. That is something that NTEU started in a very direct way, started pushing and fighting for literally 20 years before it became law. And I will tell you that I have had the benefit of getting so many cards and letters and telephone calls and emails from people, some of which contain pictures of their newborn children, talking about the benefit of the paid parental leave program and how, they no longer had to make the decision between staying home with a child and their paycheck, and how profoundly pleased they were that NTEU did this. So I think that's big. I think the pay raise that federal employees received this year, which was 4.8, and on an average 4.6%, I think is outstanding. And we look to 2024 to a pay raise of, I suspect, probably 5.2%, though we have not given up our fight for the FAIR Act, which would call for an 8.7% pay increase, which I believe federal employees deserve. And, I could go into a long, we don't even have enough time for me to go into all the reasons why, but I do believe federal employees deserve the 8.7%. Again, the $80 billion investment in the IRS, a resetting of relationships at agencies that in some agencies, this does not hold true in the IRS, but in some agencies, we had some horrific relationships, candidly. I for many years talked about the relationship between NTEU and CBP before I got to the national president slot, of being one of litigation. It was a relationship based in litigation, and fortunately, we've been able to turn that around. HHS, horrible. During the last administration, I could not get the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services to even respond to emails or letters or telephone calls, or for that matter, a petition that I placed on his reception desk that had 17,000 names on it, as I recall. So that said, about a week ago, I was at the HHS Hubert Humphrey building in Washington, D.C., and signed a new contract with Secretary Becerra. And so there has been that resetting. We've had a lot of new contracts in multiple agencies, including the IRS, HHS, DOE, SEC, NCUA, a whole bunch of them. We've had membership growth in our union over the last 8 years. We've had the Bureau of Land Management join us, Federal Police of Hawaii, federal law enforcement training centers. So we've continued to grow, which I believe is essential for the health of this union, for any union, candidly. And then we've had some, what I would say is increasing political engagement, where we have now elected a president and many allies in Congress who are supportive of federal employees and our current civil service system, which I think is really, really important.
And let me give the next question to Duncan Giles. Can you hear me, Duncan?
Yeah. Me.
I think you're cutting out on us, Duncan. Try it again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
A little better. Go ahead.
Okay. Tony, looking at the tea leaves and around the corner, what do you see for the IRS budget or the possibility of a shutdown?
Oh boy, I tell you, it's that time of the year, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I guess what I would say about the budget is, I am concerned that, we saw the whole fight to take the IRS's 80 billion down to 60 billion, and I remember candidly saying to IRS leadership at the time, hey, what are the chances? Because of course, people didn't really know, what the fine print said in the deal, right? And so I said, well, I sure hope that, whoever was negotiating this deal was smart enough to say, okay, you guys are, you want us to take it down from 80 billion to 60 billion, the end. Unfortunately, it appears to me that that didn't occur. And so what we see now is that, you know, there are folks on one side of the aisle who are continuing to look at taking money. My biggest fear all along has been that, okay, you guys got that now $60 billion, but we're going to keep coming after now your annual appropriations and keep chipping,
Right.
chipping and chipping and chipping away. And I think there is evidence that that's what they're looking to do. I'm hopeful that they won't be able to do that because, look, I mean, here's the bottom line. Clearly, there are people who don't want the IRS to be a high functioning, successful organization. And that's unfortunate because, as I mentioned, we've got, you know, we've got a huge tax gap. And I think on the whole, the American people want to see an IRS that certainly can process their returns timely and get their refunds out to them timely and all that. And I think oftentimes a lot of the American people, they don't understand. They truly don't understand everything that the IRS does and that the IRS brings in 95% of our government's revenue. And I tell people that all the time. I know a lot of folks don't want to talk about the IRS because it's like, you know, sort of a party stopper, I guess. I love to talk about it. And I love to explain to people, hey, look, folks, let me explain to you what the IRS is and does and why it's so important to you as a United States citizen. So I remain candidly worried about, you know, them trying to continue to chip away at the money. I think in the short term, that isn't going to probably be so successful, but I think it's something that we need to think about on the horizon because it's out there. Now, how does that then play into the potential for a shutdown? Look, I will tell you that, you know, I'm worried that, you know, the ability for Congress to come to any kind of an agreement is going to be very, very tricky this year on all of the appropriations. There are people who are interested in a shutdown. They think it would be a good thing. I think sane people,
Yeah,
understand that it is not a good thing. And let me just tell you on the issue of shutdown. You know, look, I was obviously national president, and you both, Duncan, you were chapter president through the 35-day government shutdown. And I had the opportunity, like every other American, to see, you know, federal employees on the news being interviewed, having to go through food lines in their cars and get boxes of food and other essentials dropped in the back of their vehicles, going to food pantries, not be able to pay their credit card bills, their mortgage, their rent, you know, whatever the case was. And, you know, there are people that felt the impact of losing 2 straight paychecks, keeping in mind now that 78% or thereabouts of working adults in the United States of America live paycheck to paycheck. Yes, 78%. So you can imagine what losing 2 paychecks did to so many federal employees. And, you know, I recall being in Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia's office with 25 NTEU members, talking to him about the impact of the shutdown, and seeing or hearing and seeing their emotion and the stories they were telling. And I will tell you that one of the reasons that Tim Kaine is one of my favorite human beings is because of the empathy and the true emotion and caring that he demonstrated that day for federal employees. It was a sight to behold, trust me on that one. And but what it does is it further speaks to me of the importance of avoiding a shutdown and the impact not only on our members, and that was profound, but there is an impact on our country. There's a cost that nobody ever wants to talk about. It is a huge financial cost to this country. So I hope that they will be able to avoid it, but I will tell you that I am concerned.
Well, Tony, we're recording this on July the 13th. About a month or so, there'll be a convention in Detroit for NTEU. You have one national convention every 2 years. And that will be the end of your presidency as you walk away from that convention. Where do you go from here?
Well, I am going to be living in North Carolina, and my wife and I are going to live in North Carolina. And, you know, a lot of people have said to me, you know, Tony, like, what the heck are you doing? You're a 59-year-old guy, you're young, you know, what are you doing? So you must be going and getting a job somewhere else. And the answer to that is no, I'm not. And, you know, here's the way that I looked at it. I have been at NTEU for 33 and a half years. It has truly been my life. Representing federal employees and being able to do all the things that I got the benefit of being able to do every day for 33 and a half years was truly the honor of my life. And I just decided, you know, that in terms of timing, I thought about it from the perspective of, you know, not what's best for Tony Reardon, although I think this is a decision that's best for Tony Reardon too. But I thought about it from the perspective of what really benefits NTEU. We're between the 2022 midterms and the 2024 election. And so if there is a good time for a transition, my view is that now is the good time. So so that's, you know, in terms of why I'm doing it. But what am I going to do? I'm going to do a few things. Number one, I'm going to try to get involved in some politics in North Carolina, not running. let me make that clear, because I've had a lot of people saying to me, "Oh, you got to run for Congress, so you got to." No, not running. If I was going to run for anything, if I was going to have a full-time job, there is no better full-time job. Sometimes, oftentimes, much more than full-time, but there's no better job. There's no better livelihood. There's no better love than being the national president of the NTEU. So I'm going to get involved in doing some political things in North Carolina, I hope. You know, one of the things that always bothered me about people that were retiring was when they would set the stage while they were still working. It's like, wait a minute, do you have a job? And do you have a responsibility to people who are paying you to do your job? I fully believe that I have that responsibility. So these things I'm telling you about, I have done nothing to prepare it. I'm prepared to retire, certainly, certainly from a financial perspective and all that, but I've not done these things. I'm telling you what I am going to try to do once I am retired. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to, there's a high school about 5 miles from where our new home will be. And so I'm going to look at trying to mentor high school students. I fully believe in trying to give back. And I think there's a lot of experiences that I've had in my life that could help high school students. So I'm going to do that. The final thing is sort of the really biggie. So I am a pretty big sports fan, although I haven't been able to follow sports over the last several years the way that I used to. I'm going to try to get involved in doing some sports announcing, like for high school football, high school basketball, maybe some college, women's college softball. My daughter is a college softball player about 90 minutes from our new home. She's going to be going into her senior year or her final year of school and her final season. So I'm going to watch all those games. I'm going to focus on that first, but then after that, maybe the year after that, I'm going to try to get involved in doing some announcing. So that's what I'm going to do.
Tony, I got to tell you, that was what I did early in my career. I was a sports play-by-play guy at a local level. And I learned you needed to prepare. I thought you could just walk in and do the game. And I'll never forget the first, it was a football game that I did, a high school football game. I remember my mother talked to me, this is my mother, saying, you know, Larry, you were terrible And if you don't get better, they're going to fire you. That was my mom. So let's just say I learned how to prepare. Take advice from people who do it and learn how to prepare, and you'll be fine. But don't do what I did and just walk in there and try to call a game without proper preparation. Yeah, that's great to hear you say that. That was the best job I ever had doing play-by-play for high school and college sports. Duncan, Giles, your final question, comment for Tony Reardon.
I've got twofold. One is I'd like to hear what Tony has to say on the future of NTU, but I also want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit. You know, Tony and I go way, way back, and we've been close friends over the years. And, you know, when Tony talked about he hasn't done anything yet towards his new career, that's absolutely true. This man will be working up until the time that his successor takes over, because that's just the type of guy he is. Because this man has been dedicated, bleeds NTU, and is just a wonderful guy. And for me, I'm so happy to see him do what he wants to do, but it's a loss for me that I'm not going to be able to reach out, talk to him, not necessarily about NTU, but about life, things going on, things of that nature, because he's a wonderful guy and he will be missed.
So, Duncan, let me just say, first of all, thank you very, very much for those kind words. But let me tell you, you know, as I hear that, what hits my emotions most of all, what you just said. I appreciate it all, but you calling me your friend is a big one for me. And I'm hoping I don't get emotional here, but that is a major thing for me. I take very seriously the friendships that I've developed, and you're absolutely right. You and I go back a long ways, and we have a deep friendship. But you know, for me, it goes, and maybe this is part of why we have a deep friendship, because of the value that you bring to Chapter 49, but not just to Chapter 49, which obviously is a very important piece of it, but to the union as a whole, and to being a sounding board, and to being a confidant, and for being somebody who can provide counsel to national leadership. So that all goes into it for me, for, you know, why your friendship matters and why it means a hell of a lot to me for you to identify me as a friend. So thank you. In terms of NTEU's future, you know, one of the things that I've said to people, and a thing that, you know, I put a lot of thought into, I mean, a lot of thought into the timing of leaving, if I was going to leave, you know, all those things. And here's what I've said to everybody. You know, I started working at NTEU when I was, I don't know, 26 years old, whatever it was. My dad worked at NTEU for 8 years before I was ever around. Not ever around, but ever at NTEU, of course. I knew Bob Tobias and talked to Bob Tobias many times at various events, training conferences, you know, TPAC receptions at training conferences, when I would visit my dad in Chicago, where I was going to school, and they had a training conference. NTEU is a part of my family, my overall family. It's a part of my current family. It is indeed the sort of part of the fabric of who I am. And so I would not leave if I didn't feel that this union was in a great and strong place. We've been around, this is our 85th year. Here's what I believe. NTEU will be around and even stronger 85 years from now. In terms of the short term, I think we are set up to continue that upward trajectory. And I am going to be, though not involved in day-to-day stuff at NTEU, I'm going to be on the sidelines as an observer, but more than an observer, a cheerleader. for this union, Duncan, for you, for Doreen, and for all the people who are going to be involved, and all of our members and our leaders. I'm going to be the greatest cheerleader ever.
Well, if I have any advice for you, Tony, just don't retire the way I did. I mean, I do all this volunteer work, and it's like, am I really retired? People, and somebody tell me, I'm going to retire, Larry, but I'm not going to retire the way you did. So I'm going to just set this up as one last comment, just briefly, if you can. Your last message to all the people who are watching and listening to this podcast.
Here's my message. I mentioned that I've been here for 33 and a half years. I mentioned being able to wake up every morning and be able to be proud of what I do. And the reason that I was able to do that is because our members and federal employees, to me, are truly an inspiration. I have had the joy of, over that entire period of time, talking to all kinds of employees, all kinds of chapter leaders and chapter presidents, national leaders, to see how committed to our nation and to our agencies that our members are. They have inspired me every single day, far more than I probably could have picked myself up. Let's face it, there are days when you wake up and it's like, okay. But I'll tell you what, and I say this to people at times, I'll go in and you're bleary-eyed and you look in the mirror, and sometimes that's sort of scary at first in the morning. But I look in the mirror and I say, you know what? I like that guy. I like the guy that's staring back at me. And you know why I like him? Because I like the work that all of our members and chapter leaders and those in the national office do together. We do honorable, good work. And I tell people this all the time. All the people that are coming after the IRS, coming after federal employees, coming after our civil service system and trying to belittle it or demean it or degrade it, we are a union. We are unified. And we are going to be here long, long, long after they're gone. And as long as we all, as a union, stick together, look, we don't always agree, we know that, but we have the same values, we all stick together. When push comes to shove, we will be successful. And so my message is hang together, stay together, fight together. The grit and the caring and the commitment that you all have for each other will sustain this union and will sustain you. And again, I'm going to be, though on the sidelines, I'm going to be there cheering you on and knowing that you all are going to do a great job. Everybody's going to do it. And let me just finally say to you two gentlemen, again, it has been really an honor to see how this podcast has developed over the last 3 years. You both do a professional, fun, laid back, friendly, but informative and valuable job of keeping Chapter 49 members informed, as well as others around the country. And you both are to be applauded. And as a result,
well,
I'm going to applaud you.
We thank you so much for that. That's a high honor. And I will say one thing, I will speak for myself, and I think I speak for Duncan on this. We certainly are cheering for you in your retirement and having a successful one. I know that I have worked with high school students as part of my retirement. You will find that an extremely rewarding endeavor. So thank you so much, Tony Reardon, soon to be retired in about a month or so, not chapter president, national president of NTEU. And of course, Duncan Giles joined us as well. We certainly hope you enjoyed the podcast. So we thank Tony Reardon for being so generous with his time over the years speaking with us. And to all of you, we thank you very much for watching and listening to this podcast. Be safe and be kind.